He wanted to buy an expensive suit as a New Year's gift, but his wife looked at the price and said, "Are you crazy? This is almost enough for our family's living expenses for 2 months."
Come on, let's go.
He still wanted to try again because their daughter just bought a pair of pretty expensive shoes. But his wife asked him to take off the suit right away, promising to buy a cake as compensation later. However, this time, he didn't want to compromise again.
No.
Jack has been fed up with such a dull life. Every day beyond working hours is taking care of his child, walking the dog, sleeping less than 6 hours every night, waking up to another repetitive day. His wife Kate said, "I'm sorry to see that you're so dissatisfied with our life now."
I can't believe it isn't a disappointment to you.
Taking advantage of the moment, Jack started venting. "Had you not asked me to give up my dream, I not only could have had a promising future, but even become the richest man in the world." This left Kate bewildered.
Who are you?
Looking at her husband, who was once so gentle and considerate, she said angrily, "If you want to buy, then go ahead. And remember to pull out the children's education fund later." Frustrated, Jack took off the suit and accepted the cake his wife offered as compensation. On the way home, the atmosphere in the car was unusually depressing. Both of them were thinking about their own thoughts. Indeed, Jack was not the husband Kate used to know. 13 years ago, as freshman lovers who had just graduated from college, they went their separate ways. Despite Kate's pleas to stay, Jack was determined to go to London for an internship. In the blink of an eye, 13 years had passed. Jack had become a leading financial manager on Wall Street, living in a top-notch apartment overlooking the entire bustling city. He wore all custom-made expensive suits, was surrounded by different beauties every night, and drove a limited-edition sports car to and from work every day. Preparing for the biggest merger in history involving up to 1,300 billion yuan, he planned to use his high 11-digit bonus as a Christmas gift for himself. He was so successful in his career. On Christmas Eve, he was working late into the night in the company. Looking at the bustling scene outside the window, he suddenly felt a bit empty and lonely. So, he decided to walk home without driving his sports car. At this time, a few snowflakes were falling from the sky. Jack, as if possessed, walked into a small store, unexpectedly followed by a young African-American man. The young man was excited, holding a winning lottery ticket, and wanted to cash it in. However, the shop assistant, without a second glance, accused him of altering the numbers on the ticket with a pencil and urged him to leave immediately. The frustrated young man pulled out a gun.
Check the ticket, stupid!
Seeing that things were about to get out of control, Jack took the initiative to walk up. He proposed to buy the African-American man's lottery ticket for $200. Later, he could cash it in himself and earn a difference of $38. Indeed, the sincerity he demonstrated convinced the young man, who agreed to the proposal. After they finished the transaction, Jack kindly advised the young man not to wander around the streets with a gun, warning him it could lead to regrettable outcomes. Perhaps sensing Jack's kindness, the young man turned to ask Jack, "What do you need?" Jack thought that with his money he could buy anything he wanted, so he replied that he needed nothing. Unexpectedly, the man responded with a baffling remark.
You just remember that you did this, Jack, okay?
Before leaving without looking back, Jack, puzzled but not thinking much about it, returned to his luxury apartment and lay down on the bed. However, when he woke up, he was surprised to find that his first love from 13 years ago was lying on top of him. He thought he was still in a dream and hadn't fully awakened. Then his 2 children and a dog jumped onto the bed, and the children kept shouting, "Daddy." This rendered Jack, who was already confused, even more bewildered. He frantically put on his clothes and ran downstairs, drove the family van straight to New York City, and arrived at the entrance of his luxury apartment, only to be stopped by the security guard who greeted him every day. Even the neighbor who used to flirt with him every day didn't recognize him. The security guard instructed him to leave immediately, or else he would call the police. The same neighbor said she could help him contact a shelter if he needed assistance. Jack, puzzled and furious, tried to argue.
"I'm the richest man in this building! I got twice the square footage you had!"
But the security guard still firmly denied him access to the building. Left with no choice, Jack decided to look in at the office next, but was surprisingly stopped by the security guard in the office building. Jack insisted that he was the general manager and asked the security guard to look carefully at his name on the sign. But to his surprise, his subordinate was now the general manager of the place. In sheer horror, Jack ran out of the building, nearly getting hit by a luxury car as he made his way to the street. Looking intently, wasn't that his sports car? It was being driven by the young man he met the night before. Defensively, he questioned the young man about what was happening, to which the young man replied, "This is all you're doing, because you said you were lacking nothing." The young man wanted to thank Jack for stepping up the night before, so he decided to give him an unusual experience. It's your life in a parallel universe. As for how long your experience will last, it completely depends on your understanding, he said. Afterwards, the man gave him a bicycle bell. Just as Jack was trying to figure out what was going on, he pressed the gas pedal and took off, leaving a befuddled Jack in the dust. With nowhere else to go, Jack decided to drive home first. However, unfamiliar with the local streets, he couldn't find his way back. He had to stop the car and ask for directions, and unexpectedly ran into a friend from the town. The friend took him into a room adorned with pictures of them both. Through the friend's description, he learned that Kate was his wife, and they had 2 adorable children. They lived in a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, living a life that everyone in the town envied. Being chary of this unfamiliar situation, Jack could only first try to accept it. He walked tentatively into this so-called home. As soon as he entered, Kate gave him a big hug. she complained amidst her sniffling. "You disappeared for hours without saying a word in the morning, and I've been worried to death at home. I've contacted all our friends and even called the police looking for you."
What kind of a man does that, Jack?
Jack was equally eager to clear up everything. Though he knew he wasn't married, nor did he live there, he took out the bicycle bell that the young man had given him as proof for his claims. The sound didn't attract the young man as Jack had hoped, but it attracted his daughter.
I like it. Thanks, Dad.
That's mine. Hey, I need that back.
Kate, uninterested in bickering about their earlier argument, urged him to quickly change clothes for the party at their friend's house that was about to start. Jack became visibly disappointed as he opened the closet, only to find cheap street goods stacked neatly within. Even his daughter ran away, scared by his stern reaction. Throughout the party, Jack felt completely out of place. A woman, splendidly dressed, greeted him. It was at the party that Jack was informed that Kate was a pro bono public interest attorney. After the long party, it was late at night when Jack finally came home. To his frustration, Kate asked him to walk the dog. Having no other choice, he reluctantly agreed. When he returned home from walking the dog, Kate had already gone to sleep. Tired himself, he sighed in desperation as he looked at the inexpensive pajamas Kate had prepared for him. As the morning light broke, he reached out to find the other side of the bed empty. Jack filled with a sense of relief, believing for a moment he'd returned to his former life. But he was quickly pulled back to reality by the crying of children. Lost on what to do, Jack went to find his wife and found Kate dancing madly to music in the bathroom. She informed him that it was his turn to take care of the kids today. Having barely managed the day before, Jack was almost thwarted by a simple diaper. Fortunately, under the guidance of his daughter, he managed to operate it in a hurry. Watching his inexperienced actions, the daughter expressed her own doubts. Confronted by the innocent children, Jack had no choice but to confess. "I'm not really your dad. I'm just here for an experience. But I'm sure your real dad will be back soon." The daughter touched his face and pinched his nose, commenting, "I didn't expect aliens to look so realistic. Don't kidnap me and my brother." Jack promised he wouldn't, and the daughter spoke with a serious face,
I'll come to us.
providing further instructions. Under her guidance, Jack first took his son to daycare and then dropped his daughter off at a winter camp. Finally, he arrived at the workplace that his daughter had mentioned. As it turned out, he had inherited his father-in-law's tire shop in the town. He had thought of himself as a boss, but seeing the red numbers filling the account book, he became troubled once again. Facing such a life situation, he really couldn't understand why the Jack in the photos still looked so happy. The certificate on the wall showed that he had been the best salesman of the tire shop in 1988. It seems that the Jack in this world didn't go to London to expand his career 3 years ago. That evening, Jack was lying in bed watching the news on TV. The broadcast was about a merger worth billions of dollars, a deal that should have been led by him, but instead now credited to his subordinates. Just as Jack was feeling extremely frustrated, Kate rushed in hurriedly. As it turned out, the children had all gone to bed early, and she planned to enjoy some quality time with Jack. At this moment, Jack suddenly noticed that Kate still shone brightly as she had in their college days. But now she was even more mature and sexy than before. Given this, Kate intended to surprise him by quickly dressing as she did during their college years. However, when she returned to the bedroom, Jack was already asleep. Kate didn't bother him but gently covered him with a blanket, gave him a gentle kiss, and then lay down to sleep. In truth, Jack hadn't fallen asleep. He was watching his deeply in love wife, and he felt the same sense of affection as when they first fell in love. At this moment, for the first time, the idea of not wanting to go back surfaced. The following day, while they were shopping at the mall together, the opening scene took place. Jack wanted to buy a more expensive suit. Kate looked at the price and firmly disagreed, leading to their first intense argument. In the end, Jack chose to accept Kate's terms of compensation with a cake. On the way back home, Jack was the first to apologize. He just didn't understand why his world self hadn't achieved more. It turned out that it was because of an unexpected pregnancy with their daughter. To provide for the child, they had moved from New York City to this town. It was also because of Kate felt fulfilled when the family was together. Jack, on the other hand, was feeling downcast, so he went to the bowling alley. Unexpectedly, he ran into the glamorous woman who had approached him at the party before. Considering his previous interaction with her, Jack subtly asked if there was something between them. Hearing Jack's question, the woman decided to confess everything. The sexy dress she wore at the party was specifically for him, and she had no use for the 6 sets of snow tires at her home. Their children being in the same dance class was also a way to get closer to him. Jack suddenly had an epiphany. His alter ego in this world was attractive. The woman invited him to her house over the weekend when she would be alone. Excited, Jack rushed to ask his friend for the woman's address, only to be scolded. His friend couldn't believe Jack would think like this. Kate was the woman that all men in the town coveted. She was so amazing, but Jack didn't appreciate her. After saying this, his friend angrily left. Hearing his friend's words, Jack suddenly realized that things weren't as simple as he had imagined. When he got home, he found that the cake he had specifically saved was gone. He turned around and found the cake in front of Kate, who deliberately took a bite in front of him. Jack wanted Kate to give him the cake back, but she refused. Then, they started chasing each other around the room for the piece of cake. Eventually, they ended up on the staircase and directly laid down on it. They playfully smeared cake into each other's mouths. This small piece of cake made Jack experience the joy of being with a loved one. One day, he found a CD on the bookshelf titled Jack Sings, so he casually put it into the VCD player and started watching it. That day was Kate's 22nd birthday, and Jack sang for her.
All I know is la 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 means I love you.
As Jack was watching, tears welled up in his eyes. It turns out that they loved each other so much in this world. This sincere love is something he had never experienced in the bustling world he was used to. Just one glance made him immerse in it and filled him with longing. Once again, Jack felt like life in this world might not be that bad. The next day, the two were woken up by the alarm clock, as today was Jack's turn to take care of the kids. When he left the room to warm up the milk and feed the baby, Kate quickly got up from the bed. When he came back to the bedroom with sleepy eyes, he saw Kate excitingly holding a parcel. She couldn't wait for Jack to open the gift. It was a high imitation set of the branded suit that Jack had his eye on that day. Though they couldn't afford the real thing, he looked just as dashing in the imitation. She never forgot the things Jack liked. Then she excitedly opened her arms, expecting Jack's gift as it was their wedding anniversary today. But Jack didn't know this and, of course, wasn't prepared. Seeing his wife's disappointed expression, Jack felt like his heart was scooped out. This was a big deal, and Jack decided to compensate Kate no matter what. When he found out that Jack in this world had never taken Kate out for a city tour, Jack planned to take Kate to the city and have a good time.
Now you get the hang of it.
That night, he took Kate to a high-end restaurant in New York. Despite worrying about the high cost, Kate couldn't help but feel happy. Jack ordered a few signature dishes and a bottle of expensive wine, but Kate immediately stopped him as $800 for a bottle was indeed too much. Jack had to switch to 2 ordinary glasses of wine. Although Kate was happy, she still hadn't forgiven Jack. So he stood up and invited Kate to dance with him. In this restaurant without a dance floor, their romance made everyone envious. They danced elegantly and seamlessly, immersed in each other, like the brightest star in the night sky. After a dance, they chatted while eating, and Jack voiced the long-held confusion in his heart. He no longer envied his previous life, but couldn't pinpoint what was good or bad about his current life. Meanwhile, Kate revealed her inner thoughts. She had once wondered what her life would be like if she hadn't married him, but such thoughts erased the most important things.
You and the kids.
After dinner, they went to a gentle and light hotel, wrapped in each other's love and full of affection. That's when Jack realized how much he had missed before. From then on, Jack started to fully enjoy his current life. His daughter's off-tune violin became surprisingly sweet to him. He no longer complained about the cheap fabric of the clothes in his wardrobe. And the passionate goodbye kiss from his lover when he left the house gave him enough confidence to sell tires in the shop. Although his desire to go back disappeared, he still hoped to offer a better life to his wife and children. Finally, the chance came one day when he saw the boss from his old world come to change tires because of a flat. Jack hurried up to strike up a conversation. He pointed out directly that if he had handled the merger case worth $120 billion, it could have been worth at least $130 billion. He also pointedly highlighted the current flaws and crisis in the company. When leaving, the boss handed him a business card and asked him to deliver the car himself. A few days later, Jack drove the car downtown. The feeling of handing the keys to the valet felt familiar. This was a golden opportunity that could take him back to the peak. During the interview, Jack was very assertive. His understanding of both worlds allowed him to show confidence and determination. He even stated that he was willing to start as a low-level employee if he could work at this company. His talent and humility astounded the boss, who immediately awarded him a luxurious house as a company benefit. That evening, Jack took Kate to visit the new apartment, hoping the whole family could move in. He proposed that the children would get better education here. However, instead of the anticipated joy, Kate complained about Jack making decisions on his own and unilaterally deciding to relocate the family from their warm home. They had moved to the countryside specifically for their children, so how could they move back now? After hearing her concerns, Jack suggested a compromise. He could commute every day and they didn't have to live there. However, Kate was still not pleased. Working here would require at least 3 hours of commute each day, taking away more of Jack's time that could otherwise be spent with the family. Jack was perplexed and questioned Kate why she didn't want a life envied by all. However, Kate's response caught Jack off guard.
They already do envy us.
He was faced with the same choice as he was 13 years ago. While contemplating how to balance the interests, he found a ticket stub. It was for a flight from London to New York. Apparently, in this world, his alter ego flew back the very next day. Kate then approached and explained, "Your return that day was a wonderful surprise for me, the best gift I've ever received. I've given serious thought to your decision. I admit that I enjoy our life in the countryside, and I have even planned our future here. But if you really want to pursue a career, I am willing to give up everything and bring the children with me."
I love you. And that's more important to me than our address.
Kate's words left Jack with mixed feelings, but he finally understood that true life isn't about envy, but about happiness with family. The following morning, Kate woke up to find Jack playing in the yard with their children. In the end, he chose to stay with them. Seeing this heartwarming scene, Kate finally expressed a relieving smile. That evening, Jack discovered the de-icing salt in the warehouse was almost depleted. Suddenly, he heard a bicycle bell ring from behind. Turning around, he was relieved to find it was his daughter. However, Jack still had an uneasy feeling. He went to the grocery store and found that a bag of de-icing salt costs $4.99. At the checkout, he saw the familiar black man who told him it was time to go back. But Jack had no intention to return.
You can't keep coming in and out of people's lives, messing things up. It's not right.
The black man seriously told him that the experience was temporary. Jack did not respond further and left quickly. He had to rush back to see his wife and kids. Although he felt helpless, he knew he would have to leave eventually. He gently touched his sleeping son and kissed his lovely daughter. His eyes were filled with reluctance and affection.
Take care, Annie. Going back to the mothership.
Subsequently, he went to his gentle wife, Kate, hoping she could remember him the way he was and never forget. Although Kate was confused, she agreed.
I promise.
And he went out to walk the dog. It was snowing outdoors, just like on the night of Christmas Eve, and Jack knew the inevitable was coming. When he returned home, he sat on the couch in the bedroom, looking at Kate sleeping on the bed. He stayed awake throughout the night, not wanting to leave this world. However, as fatigue set in, he could no longer resist. Jack fell asleep on the couch, and when he woke up, he was back in the empty room, alone again, without the noisy children or his warm wife. He drove straight to their cozy home in the countryside, hoping to find what he once had. The bricks on the wall felt familiar, but the person who opened the door was a stranger he didn't recognize, and Kate, the name he mentioned, did not live there. On his way back, he received a call from the company. A problem had emerged with the $120 billion M&A deal. Jack suggested a solution. He planned to fly to meet the boss of the other company for a face-to-face discussion. However, he was both mentally and physically exhausted. The energetic man he used to be was missing. Eventually, through contacts, he managed to find Kate's current address. Jack arrived at the apartment upstairs, just as Kate was moving out. In this world, Kate was also successful and unmarried. She had her own law firm and was preparing to move to Paris. Jack asked her out for a coffee.
Do you ever think about us, Kate? About what might have happened?
This unexpected invitation took Kate by surprise, and she gently turned down the offer. "Let's talk about it when you were in Paris," she said. She handed him a box full of old stuff. Jack didn't insist further, as perhaps sometimes the best choice is to let go. On his way to the airport for the negotiation, Jack asked the driver to turn around. He opened the box when he got home, and it was filled with his stuff from 13 years ago. The scent of a 13-year-old perfume flooded his mind with memories. A photo from 13 years ago took him back to the past. At this moment, he decided to give up everything to fight for himself regardless of the outcome. He revved up his sports car and sped towards the airport. This time, he didn't want to miss anything at any cost. He ran all the way, finally catching up to Kate, who was about to go through security. He called out her name loudly.
Kate! You can't go! Don't get on that plane!
Hearing Jack's call, Kate slowly walked over. Yet, she thought Jack was doing this on a whim since their story had ended 13 years ago. After briefly comforting Jack, Kate went back to the line. Watching his beloved gradually moving away from him, Jack felt disheartened. Was this how it was all going to end? In the end, he plucked up the courage to share their story from the parallel world.
We have a house in Jersey! We have 2 kids, Annie and Josh. The house is a mess, but it's ours. And we're in love. After 13 years of marriage, we're still unbelievably in love.
Perhaps the wild stories from his mouth reminded her of the bits and pieces of 13 years ago. Or maybe that was what she wanted all along.
Maybe it was all just a dream. Maybe I went to bed one lonely night in December and I imagined it all, but I swear, nothing's ever felt more real.
Maybe Jack's words deeply moved her, or it was the touch from another world that affected her. Perhaps Kate stayed single because of her past feelings. Eventually, she didn't board the airplane to Paris. They started over again on this snowy night. The Family Man is a fantasy family film released in 2000, directed by Brett Ratner and starring Nicolas Cage and Leoni. How many people become numb and lost behind the noisy ignorance? How many people regret and are pained amidst the monotony of life? How many people would rather enjoy the pleasures brought by a $10,000 suit, $800 wine bottles, and high-end French restaurants than appreciate the smile of their sleeping children in the early morning? And how many people, when faced with mansions, luxury cars, beauties, and jewels, would instead like to be a regular company employee, reveling in the joy of children and happy with the simple bliss of growing old with the one they love? How many of us, when faced with our current lives, can declare without regret, without ever needing to mention words such as what if and if? Most of the time, the illustrious among us only busy themselves with superficiality, while the ordinary ones are full of complaints and content with the status quo. The The singles amongst us yearn for companionship. Those married for 7 years suffer from the itch of monotony. The healthy ones wish for a leaner figure, while the aged yearn for a return to youthful vigor. Those immersed in materialism crave a hermit's retreat. Those living in poverty daydream about overnight richness. However, how many of us genuinely love our lives for what they are truly committed to the notion of time-tested permanence? Sometimes we have a choice, but more often, we don't. The life of the ordinary person is filled with feelings of helplessness. This movie thematically points to the essence of life, the importance of accepting the inevitable. This is not a movie about making choices, such as choosing between love and career. Instead, it's a movie about possibilities. Frankly speaking, it's a film made for successful people, reminding those who have achieved worldly success not to forget to nurture their family, to treasure kinship. On a broader scale, the message is to remain humble, leave some room for humility even at the pinnacle of success, and retain a measure of humility even for the insignificant people that we look down upon.